Before you get an e-bike, answer these 5 questions. Number 1 is, who will you ride with? Why does that matter? Because the person you're riding with may be far away and you may need to transport your bike rather than ride there. And by the time you get there, if you're riding there, you may be running low on juice or battery, right? Another reason is if you're riding with someone, you may need to go to a trail that's further away from your house and you may need to take a car, in which case you would have to transport. And most likely the bike's not gonna fit on, well, it won't fit on a regular bike rack. You're gonna need one that is rated for e-bikes at a higher weight capacity. Most of the trunk ones or standard bike racks are going to have a limit of 32 pounds. And the average e-bike weighs about 65 to 80 plus pounds. So you are gonna need one, a special bike rack, and that is hitch mounted. So if your car doesn't have a hitch, you're gonna need to get a hitch and you're gonna wanna budget that in there, okay? So again, first question you wanna ask yourself is, who will you be riding with? And all the logistics that go around that. You also wanna think about passengers, right? Are you gonna be riding with your significant other on the back? Is it gonna be your kid? The reason why you wanna ask that is because not every bike will have a weight capacity, a load capacity that is high enough to support an adult or even a older child. Okay, a lot of these bike racks, unless the bike rack on the rear is welded to the frame, is not gonna have a capacity higher than say 65 pounds. And a lot of them are only gonna be 55 pounds. So think about that in terms of longevity, because if your kid is kind of nearing that weight capacity, and you're getting a bike like that, then they're not gonna be able to ride back there for much longer. And the ones that do have a higher weight capacity on the back, again, are generally gonna be a little bit more expensive, and that rack is not gonna be removable because it generally will be welded to the frame, meaning it's part of the frame itself. Question number 2 is gonna be, where are you gonna store the bike? Okay, it may seem obvious, but you really wanna think about that because it's all exciting and glorifying when you're looking at the bike online and you imagine having it, but think about the logistics of storage, okay? If you live in an apartment or a condo and you're not on the first floor, it's gonna need to fit in the elevator, or you're gonna need to be able to carry it upstairs of some sort. So think about the logistics of storing the bike, because the majority of the time, you're not gonna be riding the bike, right? You're gonna be storing it somewhere, right? So it's either gonna need to be in the garage or in a closet, and if the people you live with are agreeable to have it in the living room, then so be it. But make sure that you think about strongly where you're gonna store the bike when it's not in use. Okay, the third question you wanna ask yourself is what kind of accessories you're gonna need or want. And be honest with yourself, because there's gonna be a lot of them. Vast majority of these bikes do not come with a mirror. And if you're riding in the city, you're gonna want a mirror. You're probably gonna want a lock. You're gonna want some sort of way to mount your cell phone for GPS and just to get around places and receive calls, of course. And then number 4, you're also gonna need some sort of storage, whether it's a pannier that mounts on the rack or on the side of the rack, or perhaps on a front basket. That's another thing. You may want a front basket. Third thing, or sixth thing, I think, accessory is going to be a alarm system, possibly, okay? So sometimes the lock can be a little bit cumbersome, and if you're in close proximity and you're just getting coffee outdoors at some sort of street fair or something, and you just have your back turned for a moment, maybe you want to set an alarm. And those things cost about $17 to $21, so not very expensive. And they do have remote control, which is kind of cool. Another thing you're gonna kind of look at if you're looking for passengers is to have a passenger pad, which most e-bikes do not include, and you need to purchase separately. And for those passengers, you're probably gonna want some sort of foot pegs. Aha, the seat. So a lot of the whole e-bike craze is attracting a lot of people who don't normally ride bikes, okay? So they're not used to the hard, thin saddle that comes with most bikes. So apparently a lot of new e-bike owners are replacing their seat out of the box. That's not something I plan to do, but that's maybe something that you're expecting to do if you're not used to riding bikes, at least for a long periods of time. Another thing that people buy is going to be a seat post. So there's some suspension seat posts. There's one made by Zoom that costs about $17 to $20. You can get some fancier ones that are up in the $70 to $100 range. Also, gloves. You're gonna be going generally a lot faster than you normally would. And again, you may not be used to riding bikes if you're buying your first e-bike and you haven't ridden in a long time, which is a very common thing. So the gloves is more for warmth than for preventing calluses or for looks or anything like that. But when you do select gloves, make sure that you get something that is compatible with touchscreens, so you're not having to take the glove on and off just to access your cell phone. Water bottle cages. So a lot of the bikes come with a place to put your water bottle. Actually, I think they all do, but that space may be taken up by how you mount your bike lock. And so then you're not gonna have any space for your water or your drink or whatever. So you're gonna have to think of an alternative place to put that water bottle cage, and it may be something that just goes onto the handlebar. I've seen some panniers that are on the back rack that also have a little sleeve for a water bottle. Not accessible while you're riding, of course, but at least it's on there. But something to think about. I will have a video in the future that details out the accessories so you can see it in more detail, and I'll go over that and you'll see them on my various rides, whether they're a cruising cooler ice chest or a do-it-yourself electric bike or the electric bike I recently purchased or a stand-up scooter. And that way you'll have a better idea of what to look for and what you need or may not need. Fourth question you want to ask yourself is a lock, okay? I highly advise that if possible, you do not leave your bike unattended in public, okay? If you do, think about how often that's gonna be. Are you running in coffee shops? Are you buying your bike so you can go to the grocery market? Or are you riding your bike to go to work where it's gonna be stored probably in the same place every day where passerby is gonna see it and know that it's there and know when you get off work and have time and they have time to come steal it. So be very aware of how you're gonna store the bike or park it when you're not necessarily near it in public, okay? Because that's gonna give you an idea of what's required as far as security. I mean, are you gonna get a chain lock? Are you gonna get a D lock, a U lock, what rating? Different locks have different ratings, bronze, silver, gold, and then there's a diamond rated bike lock. And you can do your own research, but vast majority of them are gonna be able to be cut by a grinder and a battery operated grinder, and then people can get through that within minutes. So it's not really about preventing theft as much as it is about deterring and them, getting a lot of attention when sparks are flying, them stealing your bike. So you may want to have more than one lock if you're going to be parking it, like say for work, or you're in a downtown busy big city. Okay, if you're only going to a coffee shop and you're in the suburbs and everything's kind of quiet, then you may not need a lock at all. You may just need an alarm or a cafe lock and just locking the wheels so that people can't really do more than drag it away. Okay, the fifth and final question you want to ask yourself is how and who will be repairing and conducting maintenance on the bike? Okay, not every bike shop is going to be a fan of working on your electric bike. Okay, electric bikes, as we talked about earlier, are heavier and they're not going to fit on the stand that they normally use for their regular road or even mountain bikes. So it's going to be a little bit more cumbersome for them, and some of them may be actually shy about touching a bike that has electronics, even though all the mechanical portions are the same. And so that brings us to another point. The mechanical systems, not a lot, but some bike shops will be willing to work on mechanical portions and just won't touch the electronics. Some will shy away from them altogether because it has electronics and they don't want to be liable for any sort of damage. So you want to be aware of what your backup plan is. If your motor goes out, unlikely, but if your motor goes out and even if the company sends you a new one or you buy a new one, how are you going to get that installed? And are you ready to scour YouTube and spend hours trying to figure out how to do that? And so really think about that. And then flats, some of these fat tire bikes the tires are actually motorcycle grade or motor scooter grade. So they're not really gonna blow like they would a regular bicycle tire. So the longevity of it's gonna be pretty good. But if that happens, think about how you're gonna repair it and what you're gonna do. Because it's all fun and games while the bike works, but when you need to replace something or fix something, it's gonna be something that you will have to deal with. Another thing you're gonna have to deal with is the chain. All these e-bikes, whether they're single gear or multiple gears, are gonna run on chains. The higher end is gonna be on belt driven, and they're gonna be a little bit more reliable and they're not gonna stretch like a metal chain would. But for vast majority and all the budget ones, they're gonna be run on chains, and chains do stretch over time, and you're gonna have to replace the chain. It's not a big deal. You can look up on YouTube how to do it and get your hands a little bit dirty and then figure it out. But just keep in mind that there's gonna be things like that you're gonna need to do. There's a big craze right now on hydraulic brakes, okay? People are like, hydraulic brakes or mechanical brakes, hydraulics are better. So hydraulic brakes need to be bled. So if you're replacing things or you're moving components around or for some reason you need to take the brakes apart, you're gonna need to re-bleed them. So think about stuff like that as far as, again, maintenance and repair on the bike. Oh, one more thing about replacing items on the bike. The battery. The lithium ion batteries don't last less than 1,000 cycles, okay? So depending on how often you are riding the bike and how long you anticipate having it for, just keep that in mind that if you do have the bike for a long period of time and you ride a lot, you may need to replace the battery eventually. Okay, so think about the availability of the battery and the availability of the company to be able to sell that battery to you in years and years' time. Okay, so you don't necessarily want to get a bike that is an unknown brand or something off AliExpress or Amazon, because you don't know if the company's going to be around long enough to sell you a new battery if and when you need it. Okay, so those are the 5 things we talked about on what you need to ask yourself before you buy yourself an e-bike. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm a fairly small channel, so I do keep an eye on those, and I will respond to you as soon as I can with the knowledge that I have.